Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. When firefighters think about occupational health, I think the conversation today is often dominated by things like contaminants, cancer, and definitely the long-term effects of exposure on the fireground, most likely. Those conversations are definitely important and necessary, but there's another conversation beginning to emerge, one that many of us know far, far less about, myself most definitely, and one that may already be affecting members of our fire service community today. In this episode, I'm joined by Dawn Harding, KFSM, formerly Dawn Whitaker, retired Chief Fire Officer, charity trustee, public speaker, consultant, and huge advocate for firefighters living with Parkinson's disease. Joining Dawn today is Steve Norman, former Deputy Assistant Commissioner of London Fire Brigade, and David Little, former Watch Manager, both of whom are living with Parkinson's and have bravely chosen to share their experiences in the hope of helping others. What makes today's conversation particularly powerful for me is that I think it brings together both professional expertise and lived experience. Steve was diagnosed while serving in a senior operational leadership role in London Fire Brigade, and David was diagnosed at just 39 years old at a point in life where many firefighters are still progressing through their careers, raising families, paying mortgages, and planning for the future. Their stories are honest, sometimes, or was for me, a bit difficult to hear, and a reminder that Parkinson's disease is not simply a condition that affects older people at the end of their working lives. Throughout this conversation, I want you to focus in because we're going to discuss the realities of Parkinson's disease, the symptoms that can appear years, and I mean years and years, like a decade before diagnosis, the challenges of navigating the healthcare system and the impact of diagnosis can have on identity, confidence, family, life, and your career. We explore the growing body of research examining neurological health and occupational exposure, while also asking important questions about how fire and rescue services can better support people living with long-term health conditions. One of the things that really struck me personally most about preparing for this episode was the possibility that Parkinson's may begin developing many years before a diagnosis is ever made. Long before a tremor, long before a medical appointment, and long before the conversations that ultimately change somebody's life. That reality alone should encourage all of us to think differently about health, well-being, and the long-term consequences of the professions we do. Or maybe as I think a little bit deeper as well, this conversation, this episode, is not simply about Parkinson's disease. I think it's about people. It's about firefighters facing uncertainty. It's about colleagues trying to navigate life, changing diagnoses. Think a little bit wider. It's about leaders and organizations creating environments where people feel safe enough to ask for help and ensuring that nobody feels that they have to conceal a condition, struggle in silence, or face these challenges alone. Several moments that you might want to listen to again during this conversation that I think are quite powerful and moving. Hearing David describe concealing his diagnosis for years. We're going to hear Steve talk about reaching out. We're going to hear Steve talking about reaching a point where he recognized that his symptoms were beginning to affect how others perceived him in his work. Hearing both men discuss this is pretty emotional on the impact of diagnosis, whilst demonstrating also just some remarkable resilience. There's also a bit of humour and determination in the years that followed. On a serious note, Parkinson's disease can be a frightening diagnosis, and it raises difficult questions about health, identity, independence, and the future. Yet, what also comes through strongly in this conversation today, I hope, is that there's a lot of research and there's a lot of hope through the support networks. Hope through exercise, through treatment, and greater awareness. And hope through people like Dawn, Steve, and David, and the wider Firefighters with Parkinson's support group who are working to ensure that others have access to the information, support, and understanding they may need one day. So whether you're a serving firefighter, retired firefighter, manager, occupational health practitioner, family member, or simply someone interested in firefighter wellbeing, I believe this is an important conversation. Because whilst not every firefighter will experience Parkinson's disease, every firefighter will face challenges to their health at some point in their life and career. And the question is not simply how do we respond to the fireground, it's how do we respond when one of our other needs. And the question is not simply about how we're responding on the fireground. Maybe we should be asking ourselves, how are we responding when one of our own needs us most? I'll see you on the other side. So Dawn, when firefighters think about occupational health today, most of the conversations usually are always, certainly now, it's around cancer, contaminants, exposures we face, all super, super important. But one of the things that struck me, from when we first started talking about this, and then when I was preparing for the conversation yesterday, is that something like Parkinson's disease might begin, from my limited understanding, like 10, 15, maybe even 20 years before somebody ever receives like a diagnosis. So by the time one of us, a firefighter or a member of the public, even notices a tremor or starts to lose confidence in their balance or sits in front of an actual neurologist, there may have already been some serious sort of cell degeneration happen. So I wonder if we could start there. Like, why is Parkinson's becoming a conversation for the fire service that we really need to pay attention to rather than waiting down the line for some sort of definitive answer?
Yeah, sure. Happy to try and answer that, Pete. So, first of all, you're right. One of the issues, I guess, is that the typical view of somebody with Parkinson's has been sort of an older person with tremor and motor dysfunctionality. In reality, there is an increase in young onset Parkinson's disease, so people being diagnosed much earlier. Nearly everybody I've spoken to has recognised that something wasn't quite right many years before it's confirmed that it's Parkinson's. So in preclinical phase, there's some of the symptoms, and there are a wide variety of symptoms, which I think I sent you a copy of the slides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Some of them could be confused with other things, depression or poor sleep patterns or digestive issues, etc., etc. So early preclinical diagnosis, people could be having symptoms that nobody, including their GP, associates with the condition. And the issue, I guess, for colleagues is when they know they're not quite right and they can't quite get to the bottom of what it is, that also is sort of plays on their mind a little bit. And certainly if Paul was here, one of the things he said was, as he was going through the diagnosis and they kind of worked out it was neurological, they were doing all the checks for actually a brain tumour before they concluded that it was Parkinson's. And the other guys will talk about that. So, awareness is key. And we know the condition is on the increase. National reports say that. We know that firefighters have a higher prevalence than general population. So that's why we started the work, really, Pete, to try and raise awareness and get people to think about it, and fire services to think about it. Because you're right, the focus has been on cancer, but also to create an opportunity, a bit of a network, so that if somebody is going through diagnosis, they don't feel alone.
Steve, in your experiences, when people start going through some of those changes, some of the health markers, some of the just things that it's difficult to put a finger on, like Dawn refers to, there's a variety of things that could lead to some of the symptoms that we'd typically associate with this, whether we're talking about loss of smell, panic attacks, just general anxiety and depression, even bladder dysfunction. So many of these can so easily be associated with just an aging generation of person. And as you alluded to before we started recording, like, we are having firefighters work till they're 60, 65. That's likely going to keep going up with the pension challenges and with the birth rate declines and just the societal challenges that trickle down into the fire service. What do you think is happening to people that are having these challenges at the minute, and how are organisations dealing with them?
Well, first of all, I was very, very lucky because I had some really, really good managers who listened to me. And that's the most important thing, because it affects everybody differently, and obviously affects people at different ranks and different roles in the organisation differently. I was just lucky to have people who listened to what I needed. And that meant that from diagnosis, I knew there was something wrong before for about 3 years and didn't know really what it was. I thought it was a whole sports injury rearing its head. But when I got diagnosed, I was quite open about my diagnosis. I knew I had to tell my work because of driving, potential driving issues and things like that. But also I wasn't on the trucks anymore. So
do you think that made it easier? easier is a very, very, very difficult word to pose to anyone that's given a diagnosis by that. But do you feel like perhaps people that aren't on the trucks anymore feel easier talking about this or have different options in terms of their employment? Because they are in a different place in how they perhaps see themselves in the fire service, I suppose.
I wasn't on the trucks, but I was still responding.
Yeah.
Still emergency driving, etc.
What was your role? You don't have to say the service, but what were you actually doing then?
I left as a DAC, but
as a DAC, okay,
a Deputy Assistant Commissioner.
Yeah,
for those outside London.
Yeah.
So I was still responding quite regularly.
Yeah.
But I was allowed to drive. This common sense thing, for example, is because DVLA granted me 3 years on my driving license.
Okay.
They just treated that as then you can drive. Now that might be different on a fire engine, but certainly in my car that was okay. And they put me on a driving course, etc. But the most important thing was that they listened. And actually, I told all the firefighters when I was borough commander as well. I told all the firefighters, and just had a rule that if my door was shut, I was resting. Mm-hmm. If my door was open, I was available to talk to anybody at any time. So.
It is beyond a privilege to be able to bring the Firefighters podcast to you, and we are so grateful for every single person that supports, listens, shares, and follows our journey. And to help us keep doing it, create more, reach more guests internationally, and make the podcast sustainable, we're asking for you to help. And to do this, we've set up a Patreon page. By joining our Patreon community, you will get access to every single full episode archive we have ever made. Now, hundreds and hundreds of key documents that we've got in there on fire behavior, firefighter health, cancer risks, incident debriefs, and so much more. So if you feel like you want to join the Patreon crew and help us make this possible, head to patreon.com/TFFPC or check the link in any episode podcast notes.
Eventually it got to the stage where I was on a 25 pump fire and in charge and on the command unit, and I was shaking and I couldn't stop it. No matter what medication I was taking, I couldn't stop it. And that meant that I felt there was a lack of confidence in me from people like the police commanders, city representatives and ambulance, etc. So I told them and they were happy and everything, but I thought that was the time to stop. And I had really good people around me who respected my experience, accepted my specialist knowledge in fire safety, and they've provided me with the opportunities to continue in that work, not in the fire and rescue service. I work for an FCC now, but certainly, I was seconded to Dawn's Brigade, Dawn's Fire and Rescue Service, and I did a secondment to the NFCC before I joined them. Mm-hmm. But I think that needs to be formalised.
Yeah.
And I already had the specialist role, whereas people, when they get the diagnosis, need to be led into that specialist role so they're ready to take it up when they come off the trucks.
So, Steve, like the example you gave there, and I'm going to play devil's advocate because I feel it's my job half the time. You were at that sort of position where I'd have to make an assumption you put a lot of time into your own personal development, which is great. So you should. I put a lot into mine. And as a result of that, you'd had a lot of sector experience. You were perhaps more familiar with the procedural elements of the service. In your role, you would have had to carry out so many of them. You understand how the policies work. That perhaps put you in a position where even an organisation as big as London Fire Brigade, who again is, other than Scotland, biggest in the UK, they had the ability and the capacity in the system and the options. But even in your own reflections there, if I'm hearing you correctly, we need to have that agility to recognise these things and adapt to them early. In a way, I suppose, to give people a hope that they can still continue in the career that they've given most of their adult life to. Do you feel like most other organisations would have been able to adapt as well as yours did at the time?
That's difficult for me to judge.
I know it is. I know we don't work in other organisations, but they're a lot smaller. They've got less funding.
Yeah.
They've got less options because there's less people, there's less jobs, isn't there?
Well, I think it's interesting though, because in my particular role with fire safety, actually we already had that system in place 20 years ago.
Okay. Where
firefighters left and came back and trained as inspecting officers, etc.
Yeah.
And they used their skills, their operational skills, they brought into the fire safety section. So we had that experience there. The stuff changes all the time and cultures change all the time.
We've made a lot of that green book now, though, haven't we?
Yes, and there are advantages to that from the consistency, but there's advantages also to having a balance of operational personnel in the fire safety area as well. And then
I
both
totally
learn
agree with
from
you.
each other.
Yeah, I agree.
I think the point is right though, Pete. In a smaller brigade, there is less option to do that.
Yeah. And we've worked so hard to give opportunities to non-operational personnel so that general members of the public can, if they say, I want to join the fire service, I don't want to be a firefighter. We've done so much hard work there. And whilst this is very valuable, do you know what I mean? That's for any leader in an organisation, that is a difficult circle to square. If I had someone in my organisation that had gone through a very difficult medical episode, maybe they'd had a stroke or maybe they'd had a diagnosis, because there's no solutions, only trade-offs. If I if I aid them into another position, I'm then going to stop somebody else getting that job. It's so different. I don't pretend to have any answers here. I'm just posing where I believe the minds of other people might listen and be like, this is horrific. What do these smaller organisations do? I mean, Dawn, when you were speaking, I imagine you speak to so many senior leaders, you well known to the National Fire Chiefs Council and everybody probably in the UK Fire and Rescue Service. How do you navigate those conversations with organisations that were perhaps not as large as yours and certainly weren't as large as London Fire Brigade?
Yeah, I mean, even prior to the work that I started doing with Parkinson's, I was heavily involved in neurodiversity. And back in the day, because it's quite a few years ago now, even there were attitudes in some services whereby, actually managing somebody with dyslexia or ADHD or some other non-neurotypical condition was a problem. They didn't have the capacity, managing the outfall, managing people's perceptions, opinions, all that sort of stuff, took up a lot of resource. And, where you've got 2 or 3 HR people maybe, and a external HR occupational provision that isn't specialist in the fire service, really. It's providing core functionality. And that was the strength, I think, Pete, of having a national group, because then you could lean into each other and it wasn't solely dependent upon those big services that had the capacity and capability. People could read across and look to what other services were doing or dip into the network to help. And that certainly helped with neurodiversity. And our hope is it'll help with Parkinson's.
Yeah, because I do think that even if we just go to like innovation or even empathy or anything like that, as horrible as it sounds, I think some of those things are a privilege of size, because when you're just so busy keeping the wheels turning, it's like, I haven't got capacity to think about a new way to do this or a special consideration that needs that. And that's really, really difficult. David, I wanted to ask what your sort of journey, because that's the thing about these as well, as Dawn sort of alludes to, certainly with the neurodivergence element, so much of this is personal to the individual. How did your sort of journey pan itself out, brother?
I apologise if you find this shocking before I start.
Please go on.
25 years ago, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's. I was still a firefighter then. I was actually a watch manager then. And operational watch manager, didn't have any hopes, any fees or anything. I'd passed my station officer's exams, was ready to go really, and I started to sort of look further and look for longer term and things like that. But this Parkinson's thing, I hid it 5 years. Hid it.
How?
I didn't have a noticeable tremor. I didn't have any noticeable symptoms, but I stopped it. I could stop them from doing it. You see, there comes a point where Parkinson's. You can mentally stop it. You think just stop that. Stopping it. It'll stop. But there comes a point we can't do that anymore. That's what
Steve was alluding to when he was at that job. It had just gotten to the point where the tremor was too great.
Since I had a mortgage, I had small kids. So I just thought I couldn't pack in because too good a job really. It's just
how old would you have been, David? Sorry,
I was 39 when I was diagnosed.
39. Wow, literally in your prime of your life. Really?
Yeah, 20 years as a firefighter. Yeah,
that's scary, but that's literally like where I'm at now. I'm 37.
Yeah. Well, 39.
How were you diagnosed, or what was? Take us back maybe a year or two from that. How did you know something was wrong?
I went to my GP. I had this twitch in my finger. Stop it. I actually had a big stack on a mountain bike, and I'd bust my helmet, bust my shoulder. I thought it was I thought I broke my wrist and done some nerve damage or something. But he sort of looked at it and said, "Well, you're gonna have to go to a specialist to see about that. See a neurologist." So he sent me to a neurologist. 2 years it took them to diagnose me.
Oh.
I had every possible test that you can imagine, and every scan you can imagine. And I got this thing called a DAT scan, which is I think it's the only thing that actually proves whether you've got it or not. And they inject you.
What is it that tests? Does anybody know what that actually tests?
It's uptake of a certain enzyme in your brain, I think, because they inject you with radioactive iodine, and you go back and get scanned again.
So when you
it's called a dopamine activity transporter scan. That's what DAT stands for, and they inject this dye in it to look at your neurological activity, and they can see from that the amount of dopamine activity in your brain. And if I can send you some pictures, but that to compare.
I think I looked at that. That's the type of the brain imaging looks at dopamine transporters activity in the brain. So it doesn't necessarily diagnose it on its own, does it? But it's the main clinician's determination for someone that's lost dopamine producing nerve functions. And it's basically like a hallmark of it, isn't it? I think.
Yeah.
So when they'd given you that diagnosis, what's the next conversation? What's the next thought? Because that for both of you must be a mental spiral.
I mentioned it to her because we had regular medicals. So I mentioned my next medical, and the doctor said, "Well, the doctor actually said, he said that's no reason why you have to pack in, is it? Because your symptoms aren't noticeable yet. You haven't got any symptoms at all, more or less. So as long as you can keep passing the operational health fitness checks and passing your regular refreshers, it's fine." So I passed them for 4 or 5 years until there came a point where I couldn't do it anymore.
So that's really great that you had I'm saying it's great. I feel like that's great that they didn't just suddenly hit the big red button and rip you off the trucks and sound the alarm bells.
Even then, after the sort of, I sort of told sort of confessed to it all and said, "Oh yeah, I have Parkinson's," and that's it. They sort of stood back and thought about it, and put me under fire safety.
Okay,
which seemed like a logical step to me. And they tried to keep me, but in the end, it was because my contract said I was an operational firefighter. I could no longer be operational, so therefore, bye-bye.
So it was a bye-bye case. Were you made redundant?
I was given an ill health retirement pension.
Okay, but the age of 39, 40 is it's not where anybody wants to be. And as much as people go, "Oh, we got a big payoff, this, that, and the other," like.
No.
The consequences in your own personal life, as much as having a career snatched away from you.
To be honest,
and having to leave that way as well.
I had a 5-year sulk, as I call it, and did nothing for 5 years. Just messed about and just nothing to live off a pension. Then I thought one day I was sat in the living room and thought, I've had enough of this. I'm not going to put up with this. So I'm going to do something else. So I got a degree in volunteer management. I became a volunteer manager for a charity, for a care and support charity in Carlisle, where I live. And from there, and I did that until 2025. I gave up then because I was just retired because I couldn't bear the 3 days of travelling to work every day.
I bet it's a heavy lift. Steve, when you compare David's story to your own, there'll obviously be parallels. What were if we can start at your sort of early, I don't want to petrify people with early warning signs and get everyone thinking that they've got dementia, because, I'm looking at this list and, I wasn't even born with a sense of smell. So I've never had one. I daren't tell the fire service when I first joined, but it's ironic. We don't even test anybody for it. And then when I did tell people, they were like, "Oh God, you can't smell like that." And I'm like, do we test anybody's? Is Dawn's better than mine? Is it a 6 out of 10? Is it a 9 out of 10? Is mine a 0? But loss of smell is one that people immediately lean to, but there's constipation, anxiety, depression, unexplained fatigue. Smaller handwriting was one that I'd read there. How did things start manifesting for you? And again, when you compare your story to David's, what are the correlations and what are the things that you're thankful that obviously you had a different outcome by the sounds of it?
I've been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together.
I mean, not dissimilar actually from the point of view of being aware of initial symptoms. So the first symptoms I had were pins and needles in my right little finger and fourth finger. Okay. And then bizarrely, I couldn't twirl spaghetti, onto a fork.
Yeah.
It requires a lot of dexterity.
Yeah.
And
those motor skills, I imagine, are one of the first ones to go.
I stopped swinging my arm when I walked. And it wasn't until I'd identified that, and then I spoke to my wife about it, and then she started to notice things. And I was fortunate that my wife worked in the city and had private health at the time, so I got diagnosed through private medical insurance, because otherwise diagnosis can take a long, long time.
How long did your diagnosis take with the private? Sorry,
about 3 weeks.
3 weeks. So we're comparing that to David's 2 years.
2 years, yeah.
I mean, that in itself,
two to
respect,
3 years is the norm. When you talk to other 2 to 3 years,
they say the future's here, but it's not evenly distributed, and that just is what it is, unfortunately, sometimes. But like, you ever heard of the Matthew principle, where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer? Because some people just can't access help and support, or they don't have the financial, intellectual capability, or that they're just. It's really sad when you think about it, but nonetheless. So you had a much quicker diagnosis, and then
but just before that, the reason, because I went to the GP, and my GP, I'd been having acupuncture and physiotherapy and visiting the GP for 3 years before my diagnosis, and it was only when there was a locum GP in on a particular day, he clearly had some experience of it, did a few dexterity tests, and he referred me to the specialist, and we were able to go through private. So the private was just by chance. It wasn't rich get rich and poor get poorer. It was that it was offered with my wife's work. That was all, and it happened to be a family plan. So yeah, but now I just have to, because we don't have it anymore, I have to wait as long as everybody else.
Of course. No. And mate, if everybody could have it, we'd all have it. You know what I mean? It's just, it's just one of those things, and it's very lucky. And I suppose the goal of this and part of our conversation is to try and make these things more easily accessible for people. When we're going through those symptoms, Dawn, when I was doing some reading on it before, a lot of people can quickly write these off with shift work, getting older. Is it the smoke I breathe or the thing or whatever? Is it PTSD? Is it stress? Like, what success have you seen, or what mechanisms of making these symptoms easier indicators as part of the conversation with either occupational health? Because a lot of men, especially, I was focused on men for a second, probably won't go to GP for a lot of this stuff because, again, they might associate it just with general getting older and the type of job that I'm doing.
Yeah, well, a couple of things, really. First of all, I think if we're allowed to talk to staff groups, if brigades invite us to have a conversation with their staff groups, it's about increasing awareness, and then people thinking, well, it might not just be that. And yeah, I've noticed that and that as well. So they start to put the jigsaw pieces together. Also, that one of the things that we've been saying to the fire and rescue services that we've been invited in to present. We've got a little PowerPoint that we give. We've been saying to them, your occupational health provision that you have, do you have access? Do you know who your local Parkinson's nurses are? Do you have access to a neurologist? Because Steve was fortunate enough that his wife had that, had that private health care. But some fire and rescue services do have access to specialists,
Mhm.
but some haven't thought about, neurology. They've got bone specialists or, sports therapy or sports massage, or, they've got other specialists, but not necessarily neurology. So I've been encouraging them to find out. And also, there are Parkinson's nurses all over the UK.
I bet, yeah.
And so, and much, I suppose, more readily accessible than the neurologists, because there aren't as many as them. Certainly those that specialise in motor conditions. So if a local occupational health and FRS know who their Parkinson's nurse is, they can just stick that up on their website. And if people are wondering, they can do a self-referral and have a chat with somebody about it. And, Steve mentioned that he had a locum GP that had some involvement. That is the luck of the draw. I mean, and I've had some personal experience with that in my own family. It was a locum that spotted it because they'd had experience with it. And some GPs, because they're not a specialist, are they? In all the different conditions you can get. And if some GPs are reluctant, we've heard lots of cases of it, to do a referral to a neurologist because it's expensive and it takes a long time, it's just going to delay people's access to it. So the more fire and rescue services can help look after the health and welfare of their staff, that all to the good. And that doesn't mean they have to pay for everything. They just have to know where to send them for advice, really.
They can say, my missus actually suffers from non-epileptic seizures, and she's been referred to neurology. She's been going through neurology for the last 2 years, and it's not protected. And it might just be the organisation that she works for. She's a teacher. It's not protected under the Disabilities Act or whatever it is, which is really disappointing and frustrating to us. So she gets, when she has a seizure, she gets taken through the same attendance protocol, even though if it is a bad one, she gets taken off no, I'm not laughing, she gets taken off in an ambulance and I have to go and get her and leave work. She gets treated under the same absence reviews as the rest of her staff. They've not even done any reasonable adjustments. But anyway, that's a headache we've got to work our way through. Do you think we are at greater exposure because of when we think of the neurotoxic agents that are in firefighting, the stuff that we're facing, manganese, lead, benzene, the PFAS, all that sort of jazz. Each of those, from my limited sort of looking up just before this, they have some mechanistic evidence for dopaminergic damage. There was a study done in Korea that I managed to pull up as Occupational Environmental Medicine in 2022, multi-disease systematic review, and they found that elevated Parkinson's disease risk in firefighters, and it was a range in about 1.5 to 2.5. Do we think, similar to the SNOMED codes for firefighting being a carcinogenic profession, do we think there is a greater risk for our occupation?
Shall I start and then the guys chip in?
Yeah, if anyone dare.
I've probably done a wee bit more in one sense. Not, these two guys are impacted by it, and they're both really, really knowledgeable about the condition. But because I work with a charity that focuses on Parkinson's, I get access to sort of neurology reports on a regular basis. And what I would say to you is the link between pesticides and Parkinson's is proven. There's no qualm about it. It's proven. And there are career types or professions that have particular exposures to the type of pesticides we're talking about. And it's really interesting that, we don't use paraquat in the UK anymore. It's banned as a substance, but we still blinking produce it. So
I was going to say, we're not supposed to use it.
Work or live in an area. Yeah,
there's a few places in the rural area that I live in, the East Midlands, where it's definitely around.
Yeah, well, paraquat and a couple of the other similar agents are proven to have neuro impacts. And, if in effect the research continues, I'm sure they're going to find more. The interesting thing is that until they can prove a professional link, it's speculative. And there's a lot of speculative stuff out there. But I would say the research in Japan and the research in Canada and the research in America, and also interestingly in Sweden, are progressing and demonstrating more connectivity. And I was
They
recently
have it in the
involved.
presumptive occupational disease legislation,
They
don't
do
they?
in America. It's in
I
presumptive.
think in Canada as well. But in the UK, it's not prescribed disease under the industrial injuries disablement benefit.
It's not. And one of the complexities with that is that it's not the only cause. So there is a genetic link with Parkinson's. And I've got colleagues who work in the charity that are third generation genetically linked to Parkinson's. So it's not the only issue. So, in some cases, it's about identifying where the exposure is. And it's harder when it's a regular small dose exposure. If there's an acute exposure, a single event, it's easier to prove causation link. And that's been tested in law already, whereas, an ongoing or non-acute exposure is less easy to prove. And also, when I think about the retained firefighters, and don't forget, I was born and brought up in South Wales, a lot of them are from the farming community, and a lot of them are using stuff on a crop spraying.
That pesticides one, I'm just seeing it now in the research. The 43-year French cohort, pesticides, metals, organic solvents most strongly associated with PD mean latency between exposure and diagnosis over 20 years, directly relevant both to that sector and also to how we should think about firefighters. That's in the Journal of Neurological Sciences. So yeah, there's been some long studies on this, 40 plus year. That's done in France. So what point does it need to get to for us in the UK? Because the efforts of people such as yourselves are fantastic. With respect, you're all retired in the formal sense. Is there a concern that we're not optimizing for doing anything about this from people that are actually still working in the sector? It relies on people that are passionate and sincerely want to make a change, or have had a great personal effect themselves to do something about it.
Well, I think we are doing. Sorry,
please, Steve.
Sorry. You go ahead,
I was going to say, I think we are doing something about it, and raising awareness is one of those things.
You certainly are. Yeah, you guys are.
We've spoken to the Firefighters charity. We've spoken to all their staff in order that if they get people coming to them, they can give some advice. They're familiar with it, the locum type effect with a bit of experience. But I think obviously there's a lot of work to do with identifying what the causes are and preventing it getting worse. But just a little stat which just shocked me, and I only heard it a few weeks ago, and was that by the time you feel the symptoms, 80% of the nerve cells are already gone.
80%?
80% of the nerve cells are already gone.
Jesus.
So what we're dealing with now is the very end of the process rather than the beginning. So how long we've actually had it before we even got the symptoms. And that for me is 13 years ago, and then 10 years ago getting diagnosed. All those, we have to make things better for the people who've already got it effectively but don't know it. As well as identify the cause, if you like.
Yeah, I think so. I totally agree with you there. We have to make it better for those who've got it now. Because if you're just like me, they're just going to get binned and put out on a pension. It's just you're not going to tell anybody, are you?
So let's look at it from different levels. So I want to come to yourself first, David, and then I want to come to you, Steve, and then I want to come to Dawn, only because you all operate at different levels in organisations. Yeah. Firefighters, police officers, and first responders are now stepping into environments wired with more high voltage than ever before. Everything from electric vehicles to solar panels feeding direct current through compromised structures, overhead power lines, and illicit drugs factories with improvised lethal bypasses. Any single strike in the wrong place in this type of environment can turn things fatal very quickly, and that is exactly why we've partnered with Jafco. You already know who Jafco are. They have been relied upon for decades for sturdy, get-the-job-done equipment, and they are not resting on their laurels. They are evolving to face the challenges first responders are handling today through their insulated tool range. These are purpose-built for the scenarios where contact with hidden electrical hazards isn't just possible, it is increasingly likely. Their insulated tools are engineered for real-world abuse and use, designed to keep firefighters, police officers, and all first responders alive in environments where electrification is outpacing policy, equipment, and training. And you know this. This is the kind of innovation our sector needs and the kind of investment organizations should be stepping up to support if we are serious about protecting first responders from fatal consequences. So a massive thank you to Jafco for backing the podcast and backing the crews on the ground. Go check them out, learn what they're doing, and bring that conversation into your service, because this isn't about the future, it's about right now. As a first-hand experience, David, what would dealing with people better, given A, your experience, and B, all the work you've done since then, what would that look like, and what do you think is realistic for
I think
organisations?
maybe shifting people to, or encouraging people to take on more non-operational roles.
Okay.
Because they are available, so so encourage them rather than thinking this is the end, I'm finished, and I'm going to have to pack everything in and just start something else.
Okay.
And it's just a natural progression, really, isn't it?
So having a bit more freedom under these recognised challenges that people are facing, and also the speed at which they may continue to affect them over the coming years, and how quickly we need to transition them in, having those as sort of some underlying exemptions where we can quickly move people across organisations. Do you see any problem with that, Steve, or do you have any additions for it?
I mean,
some people won't want to do that, first and foremost.
I'm still working full-time.
Yeah.
At the moment, I'm not retired as far as I'm concerned. I'm still working full-time for the National Fire Chiefs Council.
Yep.
And that was just because it was an outlet. I could still have done this, I think, in LFB.
Okay.
But I think there's an element of trust between you and the organisation. Both of you have got to trust each other to look after you. But I think I would have felt a lot more valued in the organisation if I knew that before there was anything wrong, if I was a 30-year-old coming into the fire rescue service or working in the fire rescue service, to know that if I get ill, if I get a long-term condition, I'm going to be looked after, and therefore I'm going to look after the brigade as well, or the fire rescue service as well, and have that contribution and do that extra self-development and things like that. Then you know, at the age of 40, at the age of 50, whatever, whenever that comes out, if I know that I'm ready to move on and there's an outlet for me within the fire rescue service, because what you've got to remember is that, and Dave said he had that 5-year salt period, effectively you're retiring earlier, and everything you dreamed of doing when you retired is also out the window. Because if I wanted to retire and do a bit of part-time work, you know, travel, that kind of stuff, that's not available to me as much now.
God, no.
It's much more difficult to go through those elements. So actually, I'm happier to continue the work that I was already doing.
Yeah. I mean, I want to make a sincere point for a second, because I know we almost perhaps humorously allude to this 5-year sulk in retrospect, but I would imagine, having not looked, but there will be people that go through that valley and make some very different decisions for their life, sometimes fatal decisions.
Absolutely,
and it's remarkably impressive, and all credit to yourself that you've managed to come through that, David. Can I ask, what was it within that 5-year sulk that caused you to have a mental switch and start climbing out of that valley, or becoming more solution orientated? Because I don't think that is maybe as common as we might hope it is. That's not to say that people care less or people are less resilient than you, but was there anything particular in your life, whether it be support or mindset?
I think one of the things, depression and Parkinson's is a big thing. I think people sort of don't think about the depression aspects, but you definitely do get depressed. And I'm sure I was clinically depressed over those 5 years, but I was just pulled through it somehow. I don't know. My wife's a constant rock for me. She's just there. Looks after me more or less, keeps me going. She still works full time.
And that's what I mean. I think about people that perhaps don't have that support network. Yeah. Perhaps their children have grown up. Maybe perhaps they've never had a significant other, or
actually, I moved back home as well. So back to Cumbria. Okay. Well, my family lives in Carlisle. You see, so I've got my sister, my brothers, aunties and uncles, and all that kind of thing. So cousins, big family.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're incredibly grateful. I'm very grateful for the support I have from my family. Dawn, I want to build on Steve's point. Do you think perhaps sometimes firefighters are a bit naive in the trust that we place in organisations to protect our long-term health? Because for decades, we obviously trust the equipment, we trust the stations. And I know that sounds like an enormously pessimistic accusation, but that's not to say from a values perspective that people don't care. But from a mechanistic perspective, if the organizations actually have the policies, the procedures, the levers, the capacity, rarely will it be they don't have the interest or the empathy to help. Do we just think something bad will happen and they'll look after me? And actually, it sounds like from the two instances that the guys have given, that certainly wasn't the case for them.
So I think it's. I'm going to give you a broad spectrum answer
Please
because
do.
what I will say is I have seen good examples and I've seen the opposite.
The good, the bad, and the ugly.
In
yeah.
the sector, I've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. And for me, what's critical is, we invest a lot of time and effort in our people. We try and recruit the right people. We then train them. They become specialists. A really good firefighter watch manager. They are invaluable to the service. They know the job. They know the people. They know the issues, and we shouldn't be kept. Our people are our greatest asset, and so, it's always been my belief, and I think it is with the vast majority of chiefs, their belief that they want to look after their people. But there are a lot of people in between. If I'm honest with you,
a chief is a rare person because they don't really get paid enough to care as much as they do. People think they get paid a lot, but for what they've got to do, it's a lot. People
haven't got experience with dealing with the situation. Sometimes they don't want to admit they don't know, and then they get a bit defensive, and it all goes a bit ping-pong.
They promise things they can't do. They get over their skis.
All of that jazz.
Blah blah blah. Yeah.
And I've seen it with female firefighters who were pregnant, and supervisory officers didn't know how to deal with it and got a bit scared of it all. So it's not just Parkinson's. But here's the thing. For me, if you have a toolkit that's available that points to good practice, sensible, reasonable adjustments, key issues that can be highlighted in terms of, continuity of employment or alternative options, then everybody could fall back on that. So that's what we want to help create and achieve. And the other thing is, there are some fire services that are already pushing for it. And I would like to see, there's fantastic research in Manchester University, which I've got a loose connection with, and they're managing to develop a wipe. You talk about the D-wipes, for cleansing. A wipe that you can wipe over the back of your neck, bag it up, send it off for sampling, and they'll tell you if you've got Parkinson's.
Jesus.
Yep.
That'd be good. If not petrifying at the same time.
It's petrifying at the same time. And would people want to know?
You want to know, but I've done some horrific things to my
thing.
body over the years. I bet I've got some crazy stuff going on. I've got these bloody massive lumps everywhere. I've got these are lipomas, benign tumours. I've got about 13 of them. Jeez, I need to keep getting them tested. Scary.
Yeah, and because you push your body as an individual, Pete, taking part in challenges or whatever, you are going to be.
I'm stupid.
As you get older, it gets tougher. But with health conditions, my belief is, if you know what's out there and you facilitate access to it, to your staff, you're helping your staff. And sometimes it's at no cost. It's just awareness and signposting.
Honestly, so I enacted a version of the Neonatal Care Act very recently for one of my firefighters, and I was lucky to have an incredible person in the people partners section, HR section of my organisation, who was also familiar with it. But the amount of middle managers that just pushed back against it, didn't understand it, said it's not in the policy. I said, well, it's not in the policy because the policies just aren't there yet, but it's in legislation. So, we can adapt this and crowbar it in somewhere, but they are entitled to it. And this is, someone's just had a baby and the baby is very poorly. Think about the message you're sending to their family when we are doing what you are suggesting that we do is the thing that's in policy that hasn't caught up with the legislation yet. And I don't know why people push back so goddamn hard. I know they're protecting the organisation. And sometimes Is it reasonable to expect organisations to act before some things like the science? I mean, how long do we have to fight for some of the contaminant stuff before the mountain of science just basically swallowed everyone's pessimism? And they had said, oh, yeah, crikey. I mean, Jesus, I get we're not as litigious as the Americans, but do you think people are just scared of acknowledging things because
Well, I don't know.
there's a cost
It's
associated?
odd, isn't it? It's odd because if you think about asbestos,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and the asbestos rugs have been around for donkeys, yeah, in the 40s, post World War One, but actually, brigades take that quite seriously. Regular testing, reporting, disclosure if you've been at a job, etc., etc. Why is this any different?
It's new.
It's not. Well, it's new. That's right, and people aren't
Trust
aware.
the science. Whose science? Your science, Dawn? Well, I'm not seeing that study.
No, not my science. I can give you. I can make.
I
We
know,
point to
mate. But
critical research in our presentation. But I think here's the for me the nub of the issue is if you know that your workforce, somebody in your workforce may be having going through one of these diagnoses, don't leave them do it alone, because the consequences of doing that for them and the family and for the service are significant. Ill health retirement is not cheap, and Dave went. He was diagnosed at 39. People are being diagnosed in their 20s. So if you've got somebody who's employed and you've got to ill health retire them, you're going to be on their. They're going to be on your pension books for 40 years. That's costly. So help them stay in the job. Help find ways of facilitating, things, and some of it's really simple, like Pete and Paul and Steve have both talked about some tools that they had that helped, because you get to the point where you can't write properly or it's not legible anymore. But there are tools out there that help you with that. So just make them available, and a lot of them are apps, they're not even something you've got to buy. But making sure that, you've got knowledge about it in your service is stage one. The other thing, and I think, we joked about it, as you say, but Dave's experience of concealing it and not, and I was really interested in the words he used. Finally, when he admitted to it, it's like, admit
to it. Yeah, it's mad, isn't it?
Admit to it, because he felt he had to try and conceal it.
Yeah.
That is true in a lot of cases, and not just in firefighting, by the way. I've dealt with other people in other sectors that have concealed it because they know they're going to get.
I was saying to someone with dementia recently, because I said, if you had a muscle wasting disease, we wouldn't beat you over the head because you can't pick the ladder up anymore. So just because you now have dementia potentially, or you're going through that process, doesn't make you weak, doesn't make you anything different or less than. It's a condition. It's a condition very prevalent. Unfortunately, it's very common now. I want to go into to yourself, Stephen, if I come to you first. What do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions that people have about Parkinson's? Because when people hear about that word, if we played word association, what are the things that race through people's mind in terms of the fears and the worst case scenarios? What do you think they have as a misconception of someone that says, oh, I've just been diagnosed with Parkinson's? We're working in collaboration with the Blue Light Show, a national conference and exhibition built around one thing. Blue light services do better together than apart. I'm going to be there 1st and 2nd of July 2026 at the event, getting involved with those conversations and connecting with people who really care about doing the job better across the blue light sector. I'll see you there.
Probably Rob Lowe. So if I've had good sleep, I take 21 tablets a day now, and if my medication is working, then you might not notice anything about me at all.
Okay.
That's different. If I'm at a bad night's sleep or a difficult day the previous day, or my medication isn't balanced because you have to keep changing your medication, then suddenly I'm a completely different person. And also from a day-to-day basis, you can be different. You don't smile so much. I've never been a smiley person, but your face says you're pissed off all the time. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm clinically diagnosed to be sad, if you like, or look sad, and it's difficult. It's difficult unless people know to anticipate or to say the right things and do the right things. But one of the things that I've got a very close-knit rota group, we still meet up for drinks, and about 3 or 4 years after I was diagnosed, one chap said to me, have you actually come to terms with the fact you've got Parkinson's? And on the surface of it, that sounds like a really stupid question, but actually it was a really important question, because I hadn't. I was still resentful to a certain extent of all the things I couldn't do, rather than saying, I've got this, how can I make the most of the time that I've got, over the next few years? And that was a really important question for me, and it didn't. And I always refer back to it. I do a little bit of work with newly diagnosed people with the NHS and the Parkinson's nurse, and I always introduce that. And so you've got to recognise it. As soon as you recognise it, you stop feeling resentful and you start feeling more positive. And I don't
it's
know
like the Kubler-Ross curve,
that.
isn't it? It's like, at first this can't be happening to me. Why me? Maybe if I do this, maybe it'll change. And then and I don't think some people never get this, whether it's with a change in their life, whether it's with grief, whether it's with a trauma, getting to that realization of the impact and adapting to that new reality. I think some people probably never get there with a variety of things in their life, whether it be a medical impact or... What about yourself, David? What do you think some of the things that some of the biggest misconceptions that people have?
I think I've gone through. I think I've gone through it and got to the other side. I think I'm definitely at one with it and at peace with myself. I think. Well, I think the best thing I ever did was tell people that I've got it.
Okay.
The best thing I ever did was tell people that as soon as everybody found out, it's just a total relief.
Did you feel treated differently? And maybe to Steve's point about the depressive symptoms or the way that you look, did that have any effect on your family and your loved ones? You said you had children, I think.
Yeah, not really. We never told them. They just sort of they grew up with it, kind of thing, and they're both fully realised now because they're both adults now. One's married, kids in there. The other one's big lady in London, so they're doing quite well. So they're both quite happy that both of them support Parkinson's UK. They both run with me, but we run for Parkinson's UK.
That's incredible.
Yeah, people often think that you're deaf when you have Parkinson's because they start to shout at you. Things you're deaf with dementia.
It's like when you're abroad, isn't it? I'll just say it louder and slower.
That's what people do.
I'm assuming it will help.
Because my wife goes, he's got Parkinson's. They stopped talking to me. They talked to her instead. I'm deaf as well. I can't speak to them. People just ignore you. They decide to ignore you, but they don't ignore me. So. No, I won't allow that. No, the thing is with Parkinson's, I concentrate now more on the things that I can still do rather than things that I can't do. If I can't do it, I'll still try, but I won't try as hard as if I know I can do it.
Well, that's that's a lot in Stoicism. It's a lot in Narcotics Anonymous as well. When I went through that, it's controlling the controllables. We think of it with Lord, grant me the wisdom to control the things I can control and the wisdom to know the difference. Serenity prayer.
I still run Parkrun every weekend.
Good man.
Every Saturday. I'm 227 now.
Jesus. Hold on.
227 Parkruns, yeah.
Dawn, what gives you hope when you look at where Parkinson's research and treatment are heading and how, with your efforts and the efforts of all the group, we're starting to integrate that into fire service awareness?
So there's more information. Dave's mentioned Parkinson's UK, that they have a plethora of information, particularly for newly diagnosed, which is really helpful. There are more webinars that you can, or podcasts that you can watch. There's a great little movement called the Movers and Shakers. You remember Rory Catlin-Jones, a BBC correspondent?
Name.
Yeah, great
Movers
name.
and Shakers.
and the movers and shakers, and they are really worth a listen to.
Yeah.
There's two guys that run a podcast. They're called Dave and Kuhan. They call them their two Parkies in a pod, and
Love that.
they're really amusing. And they lay it bare. You know, they've had a session talking about constipation.
That's
but,
great.
you know,
I've
so
seen
there's a
similar
lot
ones for
out
cancer
there.
sufferers. There's some
That's
great
right.
podcasts out there.
There's
for
a
that.
lot out there. The
Yeah.
issue for me is that everybody's journey is different.
Mm.
Not only because Parkinson's is an umbrella term and there are lots of different genetic types and genocode types of Parkinson's, and some are more rapid than others, some are slower. But also your personal situation is different. You know, if you've got young kids or a high-flying job, or, you know, you rely on driving for a living, you know, your situation is going to be different. And you can't, even in the time that I've been working with these four guys, I know they will all have a different view on something. You can't just homogenize it and say, well, it's Parkinson's, are all going to think this, because they do not. And you know, Steve mentioned the medication. There are some good medications out there, but they don't all work for everybody. And like he's a lot of years in now, and he's still having to juggle and adjust. And as the Parkinson's, because it's a degenerative condition, it progresses. So you know, as time goes on, you're gonna have to take more of or stronger drugs to try and manage in the same way, or you're gonna have to go through brain surgery. And those are big things for people to face. When I've talked to people when they're first diagnosed, their fear is that it's going to limit their life. And you don't die with Parkinson's, you live with Parkinson's in a sense. But obviously there are some complex health conditions that could cross over later on in stage 4. But the thing they're often concerned about is, particularly, you know, when they were like, you know, Dave's age or younger, so that the youngest person I know that was diagnosed at the age of 7 years old.
7?
7.
Oh, you're 17.
And we've got
Jesus.
young onset people in our community, in the Spotlight community, that are in their 20s, that are still at university. And they're just starting their lives, and they're worried about the future. They're worried about how they're going to work, how, you know, what they're going to be able to do, what they're not going to be able to do. And, you know, I think those first few years are understandably really, really concerning. So getting people early, for me, is really critical to try and help mitigate their anxiety. And also to listen to people like Steve and Dave that have been living with it for, you know, in Dave's case, decades, that you know, he's still doing park runs. That's great. You know,
Absolutely.
you can still do that 20 years after being diagnosed. And you might have a shit off day, you know, or an off period where you don't want to be 2 minutes from a loo, or, you know, you're feeling really lethargic, and even the thought of getting out of bed is too much, because that's how the condition is. And, you know, Parkinson's isn't the same every day. It changes. Steve alluded to it. If he's had a busy day, the next day he's like flat, because it's taken everything out of him. And so you can't, if you've got a mate with Parkinson's and you're listening to this, I'm sure you probably already know, but, you know, they'll have good days, bad days, good hours, bad hours. They'll have on and off, we call them on and off periods where their drugs aren't working or something else has kicked in. An interesting thing is protein affects absorption of some of the dopamine drugs. So, yeah, go out and have a fantastic meal, but actually your drugs might not work tomorrow if you've had a very high protein meal. So
really,
it's just
high protein's a problem for it.
High protein is a problem for it.
Wow.
For the dopamine, it blocks the absorption. But anyway, you know, you can find out that sort of stuff. So if you're newly diagnosed and dealing with it and you haven't got access to a Parkinson's nurse, join one of the networks. Get on to Parkies in a Pod or Parkinson's UK Network or Spotlight, which is the charity that I work for and with, and talk to other people. You know, use the support of the community to help you. And so that's what I'm more optimistic about, really. Very long answer to answer your question, Pete, but
no, 1,000%.
is having people who will talk about it to help other people, and that's basic principle of what we've started with the Firefighters Parkinson support group. These 4 guys have put themselves forward to be available to talk to people
That's
with
the heavy
condition
lift. Yeah.
and the fire
And
service.
that's the
I
bit
think
I want to be tremendously grateful for,
you know,
because
power
that
to
putting
their
themselves
power.
forwards. Yeah. Because if people aren't willing to talk about it, not willing to put themselves forward, it's really difficult for people like yourself or anyone else, Dawn, that haven't gone through that themselves. There's not like a lack of authenticity, but there's something so powerful from Stephen, David, you know, and others coming and speaking about that. Sorry, Stephen, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's not just about, Dave mentioned that he was happier when he told people he got Parkinson's, but it's not about telling people you got Parkinson's, because that still allows them to interpret how it's affecting you. You've got to tell them how it affects you. So, I mean, just little things like the people I speak with, my team at work, know that I would rather do a Teams call, discuss something, and then email confirmation of what we've discussed, rather than try and have an email conversation, because the email takes a long time and mouse clicking is difficult and all that kind of stuff. So it sounds like, well, that doesn't sound like much, but it's a huge thing. If I can have a 5-minute Teams call with somebody instead of a 3-hour email chain,
That's
you know
the
what I
same
mean?
for all of us, but yeah.
Yeah, and another thing that my specialist said to me, he's a bit blunt, my specialist.
Good.
And he said, "You're not 21 anymore. You can't. Even if you didn't have Parkinson's, you wouldn't be able to do the stuff that you did at 21."
Yeah.
And he said, if you lost 2 stone, it would help you as well. And a lot of that is about, if you look after yourself, you know, do the exercise that works for you, because not all exercise works for everybody. Do lots of flexibility work, eat properly, etc. Then you're going to feel a lot better anyway. So, and that makes you feel a lot better with Parkinson's or without.
Those awkward truths, isn't it? I always say, treat yourself like someone you were entrusted to care for. And that's so difficult. We treat ourselves terribly. We treat other people better than we treat ourselves. You know, friends, family, children. Of course, we're very, very poor, I think, generally at looking after ourselves. I want to be respectful of everybody's time, but if they look underneath the links here, we're going to put in. So we've got Parkinson's UK. I'm going to find the Movers and Shakers. I'm going to find that podcast. I'm going to find Spotlight. And for people specifically in the sector, where would you guys advise? What's the best place for them to go to? Because we'll stick that under there as well.
So I think the other 2 that I just mentioned to you are Cure Parkinson's as a charity, because they are sort of the driving force behind the research and the finding a cure in the UK. The obvious one that's doing a lot of work is the Michael J. Fox Foundation. It's America based, but they're coming up with some really interesting stuff. And on a lesser extent, because it's a wider organisation, is the Neurological Alliance, because they focus in on neurology. And if people are going through it and they've been misdiagnosed and they've actually got Parkinsonism as opposed to Parkinson's disease, that might be helpful for them. In the service, we haven't got a website.
I know.
As the support group. We are.
Would contact details be appropriate, whether it's an email for somebody, or because this is just for people in sectors?
Yeah, Dave is our primary contact email. He volunteered to do that, so he's the
Very
contact for the fire and rescue
We'll put
services.
David's email underneath as well, then, if that's okay.
And then he can fire it out to us to deal with if it crops up. But I know all the guys have had contacts directly to them now that people know that they're doing this, or they know they've had the condition. And Steve's had direct contact, Paul has, and Gary has as well. So they've all said, and you know, we can hold them to it. They've all said they're happy to be contacted if people want an off the record chat. But we are in the throes of setting up a Facebook group as a closed group that people will not be able. It's not going to be a public group, And when we get there, we'll let you know, Pete, so you can add to your...
Yes, please. We'll put it out there to everybody. But we will put, for now, we'll have David's contact under there, Neurological Alliance, Michael J. Fox, Cure Parkinson, Spotlight, Movers and Shakers, Parkinson's UK. So if people look underneath here, there will be a buffet of resources for those uber passionate members, either in organisations that are concerned for themselves personally, or perhaps that simply want to do the right thing and find a way to put things in place in case these things should face us on the doorsteps of our organisations in the UK. But thank you so much all for your time. I really do appreciate it. I don't take it for granted, taking an hour or two out of your day to come and spend some time with us. We'll catch up again soon.
Well, that's it for today, folks. Hope you took a lot away from that episode. We started the Firefighters podcast to develop, inspire, connect, motivate, represent, and most importantly, celebrate the world of incredible emergency services operators and the wider sector through this series of wide-ranging conversations. We really love creating this podcast and bringing it to so many people. Did you know you can also find these on YouTube? We do a lot of video podcasts now. You can head over to our YouTube page and follow, subscribe there. And as a final ask from us, whatever platform you're on, please rate the podcast. It really helps us as a key performance indicator to reach more and more people. I've been your host, Pete Wakefield. This has been the Firefighters podcast. And wherever you are in the world, please stay safe, be happy, and where possible, please remember and support your firefighters and first responders. I'll see you next time.